Virginia Miller Nilles, the director of the Muncie Public Library. I was born in Muncie in 1950, and I have lived here most of my adult life. My family has been here since the mid-1800s, so there are a lot of people buried here that I know. People I have known from childhood on are often here, so when I drive through the cemetery or walk through the cemetery, I see the graves of people I have known, people I've known about. And it is a community within a community, if you will. And it is a wonderful, wonderful place just to walk and to contemplate. There's a lot of history here. Okay, in the historic section, Marcus Claypool is buried in the plot with the Bursons. The Bursons owned a bank, and before the Federal Reserve came into being, there were private banks, and the Burson Bank was a local bank here in town. And he was a very prominent citizen. He had a daughter, Elizabeth, and Marcus married Elizabeth. Elizabeth Burson was on the library board when the library board decided to write to Andrew Carnegie asking Carnegie for money to build the Carnegie Library. And she was something of a prominent citizen, very active in women's affairs. Marcus Claypool was the editor of the newspaper, and he also was a surveyor out west, surveying some of the western lands in the 1800s. And they lived on Alameda Farms, which is over there near Toohey Pool. It used to be a farm over where Toohey Pool is now located. So they were an early pioneering family. Frank Claypool and Luella Swigert were my great-grandparents, and they're buried next to my mom and dad. Frank was the secretary of the fair, which back in the day was a very big job. And my father remembers going along the country roads in their Model T and putting up signs for the county fair all over Delaware County and surrounding counties. So he was in charge of the fair. They also did real estate and farming, and the Claypool Edition here in Muncie is named for the Claypools because they donated some land. And then my grandmother and grandfather are also buried here. Dr. Robert T. Miller was a dentist in town, and he worked on Dillinger. When Dillinger came to town, one of the family stories is that he worked on Dillinger. He and his wife, Virginia. Virginia Claypool was the daughter of Frank and Luella, and they had my father. My father was their only child. Virginia Claypool helped start the Psi Psi sorority, which is a big sorority here in town. When it was started as a high school sorority. She also was very active in visiting nurses and the Federated Women's Clubs. She was a noted antique person. She loved antiques, and she would give talks on antiques, particularly antique glass. And we had a lot of antiques that came down through the family because of her interest in that area. One of the people who is buried here, Austin Claypool, was my uncle. Frank and Luella had Austin and Virginia. And he and his wife, Elma Claypool, lived off of Wheeling, at the corner of Wheeling and Riggin, in an old farmhouse. At that time, when I was growing up, it was still part of the country. He was on the county council, but he'd also, at one point in his life, immigrated to Canada, and he and his wife became Canadian citizens. And during his tenure in Canada, he served in the Parliament of Alberta. And he's the only person I've ever known who was elected to office in 2 different countries. So he was an interesting fellow. And his wife was the daughter of Dr. Quick, who was a prominent citizen here. They raised Tennessee walking horses, and she had a flock of chickens. And the only reason I know that is because of the photographs I have show her with her flock of chickens. And they were both interesting and vital people. My father and my mother are buried here. My father was an attorney here in town, and my mother was also involved in women's affairs, Psi Psi, and other things. My dad was big in the Episcopal Church. And we've just been here for a very long time. The cemetery is filled with memories, and I guess most cemeteries are. But it's a great place to walk, it's a great place to be, and there's some great human beings, people who are wonderful people buried here.